YouTube channel. For sure, if you're on the YouTube channel, you have a question, send us that super chat, and we'll definitely make sure we ask your question. Just help support the channel. Driving up to Norfolk ain't free, but all good. Appreciate you guys. But before we get into any more about the tournaments, we've got a very special guest. I've been wanting to have this discussion with her for quite a while. A little bit off the beaten path for not only us, but I think also folks who cover HBCUs in media. And one of there is an HBCU. There are a couple of HBCUs actually who have multiple teams that are competing for a national title as of right now. There's Langston University in Langston, Oklahoma, and there is also this university, West Virginia State University, which is one of the two HBCUs that are majority white in population, so in enrollment. So, but we wanted to learn a little bit more about West Virginia State and its culture. And who better than one of their own alumni? Yeah, man, HBCU pass. I'm working with what I got, man. Shout out to my hotel. They had a little lighter here, and we're gonna make it shine. So we'll make it work. But in the meantime, we got Miss Baigen Seawell. She is a proud West Virginia State University graduate. I'm going to bring her on. We'll talk a little bit with her and find out a little bit more about West Virginia State. Miss Seawell, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you for hopping on here in the midday with me. I know not only are you doing your everyday thing, but also you've got some rooting interest in the game that's going on down the road at the Scope. Tell us, talk to us, introduce us to yourself, who you are, and then how you got to West Virginia State University.
So my name is Baigen Seawell. I am a proud alumna of West Virginia State University, the illustrious, as we like to call it in passing. I have graduated in 2019, so right before COVID. So I got to get like the fun stuff out before everything kind of changed as far as like school and the experience goes. But like when I had started my journey, I think just in general for school, I want to say that I knew that I wanted to work in sports. And so that was always been my thing. I've always talked about sports in some capacity. I was always like debating with the guys about anything humanly possible, sports related. And I was very like adamant about that. So I think that kind of spearheaded me to kind of stay in that realm. I was already an athlete in high school. I had played basketball and I ran track. I stuck more to track than basketball. And I eventually still stayed with basketball, just in a different way. I was more so on what was eventually going to be the social media manager side of things. So I kind of like managed their Twitter, started up like all of those things. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I got to college. So my mom kind of helped me. She told me for every PWI I visited, she wanted me to also visit an HBCU. So when I went to Western Kentucky for a journalism camp, she wanted me to look at Tennessee State. When I was looking at schools in Georgia, because I'm from Georgia, she made sure that I checked like also Clark Atlanta. She didn't really want me to check out Spelman that much. That's her personal preference. She wanted me to kind of like more so look at other schools, but she definitely wanted me to look at the schools that had the programs that I was looking for. So when I went to Mercer and UGA, she kind of mentioned like, hey, look at Fort Valley. It's like not in the same area, but still look at Clark Atlanta since you're also looking at Georgia State. So I did all those things. And all the schools were really appealing to me. She also went to Howard, so she had me go to Howard Homecoming. Not the greatest time to check and look at the school when there's all this fun stuff going on. So I expected every single HBCU to be like that. And then I realized, going on visits and stuff, that it's not like this 24/7. So I visited around like 5 or 6 HBCUs. And then my mentor, who I call my aunt at this point, and she's also my soror, so shout out to all the Reds out there. She basically told me about state when I was like in the 8th grade. I wasn't thinking about school at that time. And fast forward to, I think, my junior year, I still hadn't really set on a school yet. And I was like, okay, well, let me check out this school because I've looked at all these schools. I've been accepted to like 4 or 5. I just want to try it one more. We looked and we went up there. Um, it was raining. It was absolutely terrible the day we went. I think it was April. And I want to say got there at like 9 in the morning, went on the tour. It was a really small campus. It was super quiet. I think it's because it was raining. Super quiet, very cold and dreary, not what I'm used to. But I was definitely interested in like what they had to offer, especially like from the smaller class size. It was in a quieter area versus all of like the city schools and like the larger like campuses that I've seen. So that was a thing that really stood out. But there was one specific thing, which was one of my friends now that I'm really close to. She was my tour guide. She was like literally walking in the rain, didn't have a raincoat or anything, no like whatever. Somebody literally drove up to her and gave her this umbrella. It was like, bro, like you can't be in the rain like that um, here. And I was like, oh, it's like super family oriented here. So fast forward a little farther down the tour, and she starts talking about Earl Lloyd. I personally did not know about him until I got to state, and specifically on that day, which I found out was his birthday, which was April 3rd. And I was like, it's interesting because like I'm just really into sports and sports history, and I didn't know that beforehand. But I was very like enamored by that. And then she started talking about Wendell Smith and all of these other things, and I'm like, I know I want to be in sports media, and I know I want to work in sports journalism. So this is interesting because he was following Jackie Robinson around and doing all of this stuff that a lot of black journalists probably weren't able to do or were like starting to butt into. So it was really cool to me. And I think that stood out. I got to like tour other stuff like the studio and everything. And so like I got to really like experience everything that it was to offer. And, you know, down the line, I just became more and more in love with the school. I was already accepted, so it was fine. But they also gave me scholarship money, which was also fine. And then having like a really big support system with the alumni chapter. State has a really big alumni base in Atlanta, so they were like really gunning for me to go. And when I got there, I like hit the ground running. I did all of the things. I was involved like from the point I got there. I started working in admissions, so I'm really great with talking to people and convincing people to get there. And I got a lot of students to be there, and it was super fun. Outside of that, I was able to join a Greek letter organization my junior year. I joined the devastating chapter, Alpha Delta chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And then I also was super involved in SGA. I was student government vice president. Then I became the board of governors student rep. So involved on that side. And then in my actual field of interest and study, I was a sportscaster. I did not know at the time, but my teachers and my professors and my mentors, everybody was like, I just want you to know, like, you were the first female sportscaster we had. And I was like, okay, cool. At that moment, I didn't really care for it, but it was kind of cool to realize that, like, I was one of the first people to do that, and that in a super male dominated field, like there's still a lot of firsts that you can break through. And there's, you see now, like there's a whole lot more black women in the space, but like that was really cool for me to do that there. So that's kind of like my field in a nutshell. I still work in sports media. I'm an SID right now. It's a strenuous job, but I'm also on maternity leave. So it's great. It's because I don't have to really worry about it right now because we're in the middle of softball season, but it's still super fun. I think state really prepared me for a lot of things. I know we're probably going to talk about the culture and stuff later, but yeah, there's a million and one stories I can tell you about being at state and my experience. And I really love talking about it. And I'll still support, donate, do all of those things. So I'm very active and a very active alum.
That's what's up. So, in a short, to shorten that up, she was a big deal. She went there and she was a big deal. So, nah, that's great stuff, and congratulations on your new addition.
Thanks.
Yeah, just yeah, I think for a lot of us, so it's good to have that background. So you come from Georgia, um, like in your high school was like, what was because I think when a lot of us think about West Virginia State, obviously we think about the fact that it is the population is majority white. What was your high school like, or what was your school experience up to that? Because I know some students, they grow up in an all black atmosphere, and some people it's a little bit more diverse. I know with me, it was kind of like my high school was probably kind of like West Virginia State. To be honest, it probably wouldn't have been that much of a difference for me. But I'm curious as for you and what the just what it was like once you kind of, I guess you knew, going in the makeup of the school.
Yeah. So that was something I think I always got that question being a tour guide and working in admissions. It was like, why is it so white? And it was like, I'm not gonna lie, I said the same thing, but in high school, I won't even say high school, like from elementary school to middle school, and then like switching over to like I moved. So like elementary and middle school was kind of like mixed. I was exposed to a lot of like different experiences, like even in pre-K. Like I can say that I went to a really really diverse like pre-K, and then like elementary school was super diverse because I met all different walks of life in that specific area. I want to say Cobb County is like it's Cobb County in Georgia. It used to be super white, but now it's super, mixed. And I mean, Georgia in general is becoming, well, specifically the metro Atlanta area is very diverse. But then I moved to Cherokee County. Huh?
Said a lot of people don't like that.
Oh yeah, it's very that's why I had to get out of there. But it was mixed. And then I went to Cherokee County. Now, Cherokee County is kind of like what Cobb County was when I was younger, but Cherokee County was super white. I went from middle school down to elementary school. So they were K-6. And so I go from being around all these different like kids and learning how to be a middle schooler to going back to elementary school. And it was super white next to a farm. I've seen cows like go across and like do their little thing, have their little time, and then go back over to the little farm because they wouldn't be like really watched for real. Like that's how rural it was. And then my high school was brand new and it was still very white. Like we had literally the black table and that was like all of us. But I was super like, I mixed with every crowd because I was not really, I wouldn't call myself popular. Like I played basketball, but I never really thought that me playing basketball made me like hang out with everybody. I had friends that were in bands, so I was familiar with like the band geeks, quote unquote, but they were always cool to me because we all had similar interests. And then I had friends that were athletes because I was always working with the athletes. Like I was either athletic training or managing or actually like competing. And then I also had my friends that were just like, hey, we're just chilling, we're here, we'll go to some games, but we're not going to be like in the student section. We might cheer, but like we're not doing all this other stuff. Like, so I was pretty around everybody. So I think that's why I was super involved when I got to state.
I think pretty well prepared, basically.
Yeah, I grew up pretty prepared. And then I think like in my mind, my mom, like she always put in my head, like, look at HBCUs, but even my mom was like, what is West Virginia State? Like she went to Howard. She eventually went to state. She got her degree there. So we're both alums from there. So that's pretty cool. We can talk about that later. But like, yeah, she was like, what is that? I've never heard of that in my life. Like, I don't think I ever heard of it either. And I remember checking the website when I had like we were getting ready to go visit the school. I'm like, why is the football team so white? Like I'm asking all these questions because I'm like, I don't know. And it was like, it may be an ignorant way of thinking, but come to find out, like all of these kids are like super well versed in like where they're going to school. They know what they signed up for, and a lot of those kids they realize like West Virginia is not just white there. It's state. It's like white, very white everywhere. So like these kids are meeting Black people for the first time, some of them, and they're becoming like best friends. And so like to me, I was kind of prepared. I know other people might not be, but then come to find out like these are like your best friends for life. They always come back for homecoming. I think that's like the biggest thing is they always come back. A lot of them are still donating. They'll still donate and support in their own special way. They donate to the things that they care about. Some kids have different experiences. I feel like that's everywhere at every school. But I think that it's jarring to see at your first glance, but is to me, I enjoyed it, and that's probably because I was super involved. It's also rural, so I was also prepared for that too. So it being in the middle of nowhere, it's like literally 15 minutes from the city. It's not the biggest city in the world. It's like town size compared to Georgia or like Birmingham or wherever, but it's still a city, and there's still stuff to do. Like you might have to drive, but it's fine. Like you are supposed to go to school to experience the things that you weren't able to do before. So like if you never taken public transportation, congratulations, honey. You better get on this bus and do that, because that was like probably one of the first things that I did when I got there. I was like, I've never rode like on a bus before. I'm gonna have to do that. So I had learned how to do that. Took the bus. This is like before Uber popped off. So like all of these experiences, I feel like I wouldn't have learned if I didn't go there.
Mhm.
So it was a jarring thing at first, like I said, but I got used to it, and then I eventually like branched out and learned a whole bunch of stuff. It was super fun, and then like the demographic thing was like the last thing on my mind because I felt like I was really helping the school in the long run.
Yeah. Again, we're talking with Baigen Seawell. She is a graduate of West Virginia State University. And so, we're talking about West Virginia State University, along with its. Are they your? Do you guys consider them your rival, Bluefield State University?
I
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think now it's becoming more because Bluefield, like, I'm not gonna lie, I give Bluefield their props because they came and hit the ground running. Like their content, and this is coming from my sport media slash like creative perspective. Their content is getting is blown out of the water. Like they literally came and hit the ground running since they joined the CIAA. I've been
right.
advocating for us to rejoin the CIAA for years, but I think it's a travel thing, and I think that's just like the inconveniences. We're like we would be the most far out of like the schools, because we're like closer to Kentucky than it is Virginia, um, Maryland, and all these other places. So I
Oh,
think that's part of the reason why we're still in the Mountain East Conference. I mean, we've clearly done well with what where we are. There's a lot of ranked teams that are in the Mountain East, but gosh, I just in my own mind, we are like Bluefield's rivals. I think we've beaten them every single time we've played them, but like gosh, I always thought of them as our rival, and I'm sure like in the past it's probably been more heated than it is. But yeah, I think now that they're starting to like ramp up, they're starting to get some attention too. I think it's gonna revive it. Our real rival is University of Charleston because it's up the street, but
mm.
I think a true like HBCU rival, I think it would be Bluefield, and I'm sure it was that in the past before I was there. We just got back to starting to like play them consistently, so we'll see how it goes in the long run. Though I'm excited to see how that goes. I just
Yeah.
want us to join the CIAA though.
You said what?
I would love for us to rejoin the CIAA though. I just yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think if some things keep going the way certain schools that they are, there may be an opening. But unfortunately, but yeah, that was going to be one of my questions too. I was going to ask you uh,
Hmm.
about this the CIAA thing because again, so I've done the research like you have too. So Bluefield State and West Virginia State were both in the CIAA in the 30s, 40s, and in the 50s, and then. I believe this decision came from the powers that be in West Virginia that they joined West Virginia Centric Conference, and that was also around the time that their demographics were changing rapidly. The black people that were in West Virginia were beginning to move out of West Virginia, and I know Bluefield State has the story of their the bomb that went off in 1968 that really ended up impacting their school, getting students off campus, and really it's where it really became majority predominantly white. Is there any history background like that there at West Virginia State, or just for people who may not know that for you guys?
Yeah, so from my own like research and understanding, I think state has been very much so like black for a long time, but I think like when integration hit, it was kind of that thing where okay, WVU is here, University of Charleston is a super private school that is expensive, and Marshall is out the way. And at the time, like I highly doubt that they had like the branch schools that they have now. Like Marshall has a South Charleston campus that is like up the street from State, and the private, or not, I won't say private schools, but the community colleges that were in the area. I really don't think that they were around like just yet. So those weren't really options, and so with integration, it made it easier for not just black people to go to WVU if they want to now. Like now you have white people that are like, okay, I can go to state now and it's more affordable and it makes sense. It is right there because we're kind of in an area where state is, well, state, I'm saying like the Canal River, which is the river that's literally right behind our stadium and it runs behind our campus. That was like a mode of transportation. Like people would go up and down to like get people to basically go there, behind the railroads and everything like that. So they would use that to like navigate and everything. And so that's how they would tell people about the school and then they would come. And then outside of that, when, it made it easier to transport or to move around and stuff like that, you got more and more people coming. So there was like a large, like I said, black population. And then once I think integration hit, it made it more easy for people to just, okay, I'm just gonna go here. And that's why I think like I want to say like a couple years back, I think one of like the first like white cheerleaders that we had when he had passed away,
I
like
want to say like a couple years back,
it was like I
the
want to
first
say it was
cheerleaders that we had when he,
it was around 3 years ago. But yeah, he passed away and it was like I won't say it was a huge deal, but people remember like, oh yeah, that was like one of the like first white cheerleaders. I want to say he came in like the 60s. So yeah, it was one of those things where I think integration kept the school open too, because I feel like it was probably the same thing with Bluefield, where okay, now these people can go to Charleston, they can go to WVU, Marshall, but now like you have options. Um, so they left, and then you have other people coming in, and you don't have to stay in West Virginia if you don't want to. That's why a lot of kids that go there they leave. But I mean, I think with some of them coming in, it keeps like the schools open, and then like on top of that, we have our online programs and everything like that. So I really feel like that's where a lot of schools are like, or a lot of schools have ended up resorting to like these other students who might be interested in the school, and then they do that. And I think that also helps with recruiting too, because a lot of kids, they might not know about the school, but that was one thing that I always emphasize. I'm like, if you're coming here, you're gonna know the history, you're gonna know what you're doing, you're gonna know like what you're getting into. But I think it still goes back to the alums that are not black. They definitely know uh, what they're getting into, especially if they came while I was there, because I'm like, that was one of my biggest things when I was in SGA for the students to know. So yeah, it's kind of weird, but the integration thing, I think it was like reverse. You get an influx of, white students, and then you have black students who don't want to stay in West Virginia that leave, or they don't have interest because it's like it's right up the street. So it's one of those things where that happened, but I think the school still being open is a really good thing. I think one of the things that we probably will have to improve on is like emphasizing and keeping that history like and the traditions consistent so it doesn't get lost in translation, because when you have that many people it can get lost in translation. But so far it's been pretty consistent with that. Like people are still supportive and they still very much don't know what they're getting into when they get there.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff there. So, and then we'll get on to the sports in just a second. I don't want to
Yeah.
keep it too long, but you talk about, now, there's been a resurgence in, um, well, I don't want to say resurgence, but now that we have social media and the internet, there's a lot more discussion about HBCUs, even more so than when I started HBCU Game Day back in 2012. And it's great in one sense, but also can be very cliquish. It can be very it can sometimes you can go from going back and forth to getting nasty with folks.
No.
Like let's just keep it a buck. Again, for everybody, if you're watching on YouTube, please remember to like the stream. But let's keep it a buck and get a little nasty sometimes. And when you see and hear HBCU discussions as an alumna of West Virginia State University, which is one of the two HBCUs that is predominantly white, like how how do you feel? Just as coming from that perspective, that you feel like you guys are shut out of the conversation or ignored, or just kind of what's that like? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, I want to say, when I was like still in school, like we had like I remember, and it probably still is a thing, I don't know, but we had like this huge HBCU group chat, and I remember joining, and I remember everyone was like, "What is West Virginia State?" And I'm like, It's an HBCU. That's why I'm here. And I remember like there was one I think interaction that I still think about to this day. I think one of the girls that I was talking to, she was like, "Well, it's very white on your website. Like, there's a whole bunch of white people on there. I don't understand like how you want to claim that that's an HBCU." I was like, well, if you look at the textbook definition of what it is, according to the Department of Education, it's any school that was founded before integration. So let's start there. One, two. There's like a whole bunch of people that have come from this school that have done things then and now that you might not really think. Oh yeah, it's not like huge or whatever. It might not be like on a national or international scale, but it's still done. And I think the other thing is like I feel like a lot of people again lose the plot because it's like we are so, like you said, it's cliquish, but we're like so gung ho on our own schools that like you got to be able to support the other ones in order for all of us to grow. That's kind of how I've always looked at it, and that's why I've always supported every and all schools. Um, I think another experience, I think every single time for the HBCU 5K in Atlanta, our alumni chapter always like got the most money as far as donations and like support. So like we would always generate the most money every single year for a while. Um, so that always like for some whatever reason, it's not that I don't think people realize it. I think it's just like people aren't thinking about the smaller schools because there's not just like a West Virginia State. You have like these very small schools in Alabama because that's where I live now. There's super small schools in Alabama. Like I remember hearing about who was it? I want to say it was Oakwood. And I remember somebody was like, "What's in Oakwood?" And I was like, "Don't do that because there's people that go here, and these people like support their school like through and through." Or like Talladega, super small, but they're really good at basketball. They've always gone to the NAIA tournaments, and they just went like a couple years ago. So, and I think the last team to go to an NAIA tournament was West Virginia State, and that was like in the '80s. So it's like you guys kind of have to like know your history, but also like respect the schools that are here because if every single school had that energy, I feel like it would be a little more respectful. But again, I think it's no different than like how PWI is like they really go in on each other. Like SEC schools are freaking insane. Like they are literally like foaming at the mouth for their schools. And I feel like to some extent we kind of do the same thing for our own schools. Like we're really like go hard for our schools and we kind of forget the other ones. But I pretty much do that same thing. I always like to educate people because that's always what I've been doing. Like I said, when I was earlier, when I would argue with guys about sports, it's the same thing. So I always like try and approach it in a respectful manner. But if we want to get disrespectful, we can. But I usually don't go that route because I know like it's coming from a place of just not knowing, and it's better to just know than to be disrespectful about it. I mean, I don't really take it personally. I do feel like we can sometimes get lost, in talking about it, which is why I like to bring it up and always talk about it. I think it's better to continue to talk about it for people to know than to not talk about it at all. So it doesn't bother me anymore. Like I will talk in the void if I have to about my school. But I feel like me and all my friends, like we are all supportive of our schools. And like I feel like with time, especially since we're becoming the older young alumni, like I think we're getting to that point where like now is our
Yes,
chance to
receiving
step
them.
up. It's our chance to step up and everything. I think that that's like one of the things that we have to do. So advocating is huge for me, but it doesn't bother me anymore. I won't say that. I just like I said, I just educate where I can.
Okay.
That's all I can do.
I got you. Yeah. So now that we talked about the culture and all of that stuff, is great. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you have any questions, if you're on YouTube, please make sure to drop that super chat, and we'll definitely make sure that we get it up and talk there. But we'll also talk about. I have a question on my so we'll talk about basketball because that's a big reason why we're here.
Oh yeah.
So first off, both of your teams are in the NCAA tournament.
Yes.
But let's start at the let's talk about that. Let's break that down. So the start of the season. For men's basketball, you guys hosted the Earl Lloyd Classic.
Yes.
And first on your menu were the defending champions of the CIAA, Winston-Salem State University, just happens to be my alma mater.
Yeah.
And, very good, very heated game. I do recall that I think WSSU was winning, and the stream went out, and then
Yes. Oh my gosh.
and
Please
then
don't
all
remind
of
me.
a sudden, I come out and West Virginia State has a 7-point win, and I'm like, anyway, I knew, because I remember seeing you tweeted about it, because I think you're really probably the only West Virginia state person that I follow or that comes up on my feed. So I remember you were tweeting about it. I knew that loss was going to come back and bite us in the ass, and it most certainly did. You guys went 20-9
Yeah.
and got an at-large bid, number 7 seed in the Atlantic region. Winston went 19-9
Yeah.
and did not get in. Now, of course, there's a whole nother reason we lost to not only, man, this is tough. I didn't even think about this, man. We lost not only to y'all, y'all a respectable program, obviously. We also lost to Bluefields. We started the season with a loss to West Virginia State, and we ended the season with a loss to Bluefield State. Man, I'm gonna have to talk to Cleo about that. But anyway, when you guys do get a chance to match up against other HBCUs, is that something that you pay a little bit more attention to it? Obviously, you pay attention to West Virginia State sports regardless, but is that something that you kind of, for you, that you may pay attention a little bit more? What's that like?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I definitely pay attention more because I feel like, and I talked to the athletic director, Nate, if you're watching this, that I'm in your DMs all the time telling you what we can do to get better all the time. I give him my unsolicited free consultations at all times, but not joking aside, I should say. Especially when we play for the Earl Lloyd Classic, because at first when I was there, when I was still there, like 2015 to 2019, Earl Lloyd Classic was primarily the schools in West Virginia. It was never really that many HBCUs, and now it's starting to trickle the other way. Outside of that, kind of backtracking, not backtracking, but sidebar. For football, we would usually play PWIs a lot. We still do. We would play the teams in our conference, but I remember a couple times we played Kentucky State and we would dog walk them. I'm so sorry if you're in a Kentucky State alum, because it was like 72 to something one time. I swear it was like a basketball score. It was bad, but when they would come, it would be it would be a different vibe because you would have alums coming to those games. And so I think the Earl Lloyd Classic specifically, I always really wanted us to play HBCUs. And when we did, I think it was a little bit sweeter because it's okay, there's history behind this. Let me look at the record books. Let me see last time we played them, what was the score? All this other information that needed to be known. So I definitely watch those a little harder because it's important. Those are the times that we interact with them, and then that might be a chance that we play them again. It might very well be that we have, Winston-Salem come back, Bluefield come back. Obviously, they're closer.
Nah, man, y'all gotta come to games. If you're 80 years on here, y'all gotta come to games. The Mount East and PSAC teams, they don't really like to come down to the CIAA because they already, that was part of my discussion. Now y'all gotta come to CE games. Y'all gotta come for the Cleo Hill Invitational. I'm giving my AD Thomas on the line. We gotta make that happen. It can't be the one track thing.
Yeah.
Games is different.
I
so
agree.
you've seen the videos and everything, but no, I think that's great. I know Shaw participated in the one this year. Shaw actually beat you guys.
I was sick because it was looking good until it wasn't. So
so look, when people beat the Rams, they get a little excited, and the next game, the next night, I don't know.
Yeah, it was rough, and I feel like when the men lose, I don't know, it hits a little harder. I'm always when the women lose, it's okay, I can deal with this. We'll bounce back because we are usually especially with our new coach, Charles Marshall is the greatest coach that I've ever seen. He's literally taken that team and built them up with what he's had, and then getting what he needs to improve it. And he's always continuously improved every single year. Last year they were ranked, this year they were ranked. At first they were ranked, it was getting a little shaky, and then they got back into the rankings again. And the Atlantic region is not easy for either. So I think to even be ranked right now, regardless if you're 9 or whatever, that was fine. And then like the men also beat a ranked opponent right before the actual tournament started. So yeah, I do think that we do need to like, actually travel more. But I think again that goes with we have to schedule these like games a whole lot more. I think basketball is like more of what people come out to. Football, people go because it's football. But basketball is like what people really show up and show out for because basketball programs have always been super successful. And then outside of that, like knowing people who are on the basketball team that have done a whole lot of good things, men's and women's, like it's always fun to see. I know one of my a couple of my pro fights, they played on the 2004 squad that went to nationals, and that was like, that was a while ago, but like them telling me the stories of how it went and like the experiences they had, it was definitely interesting to me. So like outside of that, like you just have to be aware and then also schedule these things and make sure that you're available for them and go to them and travel. I think that was one thing I did do because you do not want to be in West Virginia for too long. Like you just got to travel. And that's how I got to like know a lot of people from a whole lot of different schools, from WVU to Kentucky State to Central State. We would play Central State for other sports too. So it was like you just gotta get out there, get to know some people, acquaint yourself with other schools. I think that's one of the things that a lot of schools can do with us, and then us to them, vice versa. So I think that's one thing that I aim to do every year is try and go to a school, get to know some people, let them know about my own school, just be the propaganda person that I am when it comes to state. So yeah.
Gotcha. I definitely appreciate your time. As you said, both your men's and women's programs are there. It would be great for you guys to be in the CIAA for a lot of reasons, but being in that Mountain East, it does have some advantages. It's it's interesting. It's interesting. Your women's team got in as well. They got an at-large bid. And a lot of people were looking at Virginia State. Nationally ranked. I think they were 23-5. They didn't get in. And traditionally, CIAA women's basketball has been very good. I mean, they have multiple national champions. Teams that have gone to the national championship game. But I guess, do you think it's an advantage for you guys being in the Mountain East if you're comparable to a CIAA team, like in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy being in the Mountain East, but I feel like scheduling out. I mean, there's clearly like a whole lot of like good teams outside of the Mountain East. I mean, there's a lot of teams that get ranked. Like usually it's like it'll usually be the typical ones like Glenville. We beat Glenville last year. Glenville was a very good team at the time. We beat them basically like it was a game of free throws. And so that was a huge advantage because it got us, in there like for the tournament. But like I think still scheduling like these other teams that battle test you, like I'm a huge advocate for that. And like even working where I work now, like all of my coaches, they will, specifically in softball, our coach will definitely like schedule those games. Like, why are we playing these power fives like 5 times in a row? Because at the end of the season, we'll obviously be good enough to, possibly get a chance to play in the, Women's College World Series. That's the end goal. But I think that is one of the things that from outside looking in, being battle tested more, traveling more, being prepared for that. I know it's like a lot, especially like on the budgeting and on the scheduling and things like that. But having like one or two of those games does not hurt. And I think that's one of those things that, in the non-conference slots, if we can travel down to North Carolina and play a couple of games, like that's perfect. I think that would be great because there, like you said, there are really, really good teams, even in Virginia. Like you don't have to go far, but like playing these teams helps a lot. But I definitely understand the frustration, like when you have a really good record, but just based off of your strength of schedule and the conference that you're in or the teams that you've played, it might not be good enough because they're also looking at, what are the rankings of these other teams? What are you doing? Or what is like the stats? What are the stats looking like? How are you performing? All of these things that go into it. I get it. So I definitely wish there were more HBCUs that were in there because there are great teams. I feel like D2 won't be like how it is with D1 with how they'll extend it or open it up more, but I would love to see that. And that's another thing too. Like I'm a huge advocate for like the smaller schools because I didn't go to a big school, so I
Right.
want those same amenities and those same things that they give for the D1s to give to the D2, especially working at a D1 school. Like, I want to be able to see the same things that y'all are doing here for the smaller schools, give that same energy. So hopefully one day it will be big enough to where we can have more schools in there, because I feel like a lot more HBCUs would be in the tournament if we had more availability for it.
Gotcha. Well, I really appreciate you for hopping on today. I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I definitely appreciate you for hopping on and explaining to us a little bit about the culture at West Virginia State University, and talk a little bit about the athletics as well. So hopefully we'll have a chance to have you on again sometime soon. But just before we get out, is there anything if people want to follow you or your work, or anything you want to plug? Feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I work in sports media, but I also just do sports media related things in general. You can follow me on the Twitter if you want. It's at Precious Color. But you can definitely, like, if I ever put any work out, it's always usually on my Precious Media page. Like I said, I do a whole bunch of different things, but the biggest thing is, if you really want to follow somebody, follow WVSU Athletics. That would be great. Don't worry about me, because I'm gonna always talk about my school. It's always gonna be biased in nature, but definitely follow like our page, follow our athletics. We're doing really big things, especially in track. It's track season right now, and I feel like we're probably gonna be one of those schools to look out for at the D2 level, since we just got it back. But if anything, follow our athletics pages. And if Javier is watching, he's my biggest hater. He was laughing at me. I was like, dude, I'm trying to put our school on. But yeah, that's really all I have. And Go State, that's literally the biggest thing. You don't have to follow me. I'm literally a loose cannon, so I would advise you not to follow me.
Hey, rule number one is know thyself. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no doubt. Well, I appreciate you for coming on. Yeah, you got to get in your 80s here, man. We got to get that return trip down to North Carolina. Come to see E Game Center. To trade